You're tuned in to Ask the Good Doctor, live each and every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Central, and 10 a.m. Pacific. Dr. DrBrookshire is here to answer your questions live.
Welcome. It's Wellness Wednesday. I'm Dr. DrBrookshire, and you're listening to Ask the Good Doctor. We are here to help you attain, maintain, and reclaim your perfect health. Grab your Good Doctor notebook. You're not going to want to miss a moment of this. Like, comment, subscribe, and share. Have we got a series coming up for you starting now? We are pleased to have with us today one of the good doctors in our village. We love him so much. He has brought so much inspiration and enlightenment to us all. He is a biochemical engineer, and he's on 2 DARPA teams. Welcome, if you will, Dr. Sam Shepard. Hi there.
Dr. LaJoyce, it's so nice to be with you again. And
and so nice
get this message out.
Listen, it is so much going on. That's why we need to do this series today, because we need you to help us make sense of some things that don't make sense. And so I would like to start with discussing you, the one who brought to light to us about how important the C-Reactive Protein levels are within our body. Please share once again what that means on our blood work.
Sure. C-reactive protein is a protein that's produced in the liver in direct response. It's proportional to your inflammatory disease state. It's a systemic versus local inflammation marker. So if your body is in a chronic, systemic inflammatory disease state, we use that as an indicator. Up until about 15 years ago, it used to be a standard part of our blood work. So when you'd go and get your blood work done, your CBC, it would be a standard part of that. Well, everybody's blood work kept coming back that they were in a highly oxidative disease state, and the doctors didn't have a clue how to get it down without giving you steroids. Well, chronic use of steroids is not going to be acceptable. No. So they just stopped running the test.
You know, what's interesting about what you say, you said 15 years ago it was a standard of care. I checked my mother's blood work, and she went to the same doctor for more than 30 years. And do you know she'd never had a CRP test?
Really?
Never.
Now, and that's really unfortunate, because it's a great test. Yes. It's a quick test. It's an inexpensive test. And it can have huge impacts on knowing what your potential is for generating a chronic lethal inflammatory disease. So the doctors doctors treat the symptoms. CRP is a measure of inflammation, which is a root cause of disease. So it's not something that doctors spend a lot of time on in trying to eliminate disease. They say, okay, once you get the disease, now we can treat it, and we'll deal with the side effects of that treatment. But there's 2 types of CRP. The old test was the standard CRP, which would measure anything less than 10 milligrams per liter. It's sort of a quick carry-all. If you were less than 10, then they would consider you as not being in an inflammatory disease state or an acute inflammatory disease state. Over 10 meant that you were highly susceptible. And this applied in rheumatology and in cardiac care. That's where this CRP number primarily was utilized. They still run it to this day. So when they began to look at inflammatory diseases, they saw that people who had less than 10 milligrams per liter on their CRP test were still generating inflammatory diseases. Mm-hmm. So they end up changing the test to what's called a high sensitivity CRP. And that HSRCP years ago, they said if it was less than 3 milligrams per liter, your probability of getting an inflammatory disease was very low. And they've now focused on it that they're shooting, it can never be zero, because inflammation, there's a good side to inflammation too. It's what signals cytokines and things to go on in our body. But now they've moved the number. I've always used 3 milligrams per liter. Now they've moved the number down to 2. So they're headed in the right direction. It's going to be a little tougher. There's not a lot of ways of getting your C-reactive protein down without the use of pretty powerful steroids. But there's a side effect to that too, because the steroids themselves will generate inflammation as they're processed in the liver. So you might get a short-term bump, but the long-term is you end up, you're paying the piper on the backside.
I have something to show you.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I have something to show you. Chris, can you put up this document that I'd like to show you? This is an example of 2 C-reactive protein blood levels. One is mine and one belongs to a patient. And the reason why I want to show this is because just what you say about it, the marker being that they wanted less than 3, that was very evident on this blood work of mine. I'm showing you my own personal blood work. And then one of my patients came in just 2 months later, and the marker was changed. It was changed to now less than 10. And my question to you, why do you think this sudden increase within a 2-month period? My blood work was taken December 30th, and the blood work I'm going to show you was taken February 15th.
It's the doctor's prerogative. If the doctor checks the box CRP, it will be recorded as 10 being the maximum. If the doctor checks the box HSCRP, it'll be less than 3. 3 will be the maximum. So there's different standards based on that test. One is the CRP is like a 35,000 foot look at your inflammatory disease. It's a quicker test to run. The HSCRP is a little more involved, but it's more specific to really fine tune in on your chronic inflammatory disease state.
Now, would that show up on your blood work if you're looking for a result? Would it show up as HCSRP?
Yeah.
Or would it just still be CRP?
It should show up. If you requested HSCRP, it should show up as HSCRP. If the box was ticked for CRP, it would show up as CRP. Okay. But,
case in point. So this blood work, both of them show up as CRP.
Really?
Not HSCRP.
And the limits are different.
The limits are different in 2 months' time. What's going on here?
Yeah. So.
Okay, here comes Chris.
I'm sorry. We'll have to break. It's a file that I can't upload quickly. I can show a screen share just so that you can at least see it, and then I'll still cut it in and post so you can have a real conversation.
Okay, you cut it in and post, and we'll just keep talking about it.
Okay.
But I'll still pull it up for you. Hold on.
Okay.
Now, some labs will go ahead. They all have different standards. For example, I've got a real concern. I've got people calling up and they're saying, well, I have my CRP. I'm in a disease state, but my CRP is 2. And I said, well, what's the units of that? They said, what do you mean? I said, well, what is it? Is it milligrams per liter? Or is it milligrams per deciliter? And they say, well, it's milligrams per deciliter. I said, then you got to multiply that number by 10 to get on the same standard that we're at. So he's technically at 20 on his CRP when he thinks he's okay at 2. So we have to look at it very, very carefully and make sure we're talking apples and apples here.
Okay, so this looks like apples and apples to me. So here comes the science girl popping right out from when I used to make color bombs in the chemistry lab and the teacher knew it was me when there were 30 kids in the classroom. LaJoyce Hunter, like that 30 kids in here. How you know it's me? Oh, it's you. So here it says CRP, the one at the top, it says CRP less than 3 milligrams per liter. And then on the where it's double underlined, that is the limit. So that's my blood work. And in the square there, it says December 30th, 2022 at 11:11 a.m. Oh, angel number 11:11 a.m.
Wow.
That's my blood work on the top. Then just below that in the square where it says February 15th, 2023. And then on the bottom where I've asterisks where it says C-reactive protein result, the same. And it says the value of it is 4.8. And it is registering as less than 10.0 milligrams per liter. So that's what I wanted to get down to the bottom of, the difference in these dates, December 30th versus February 15th, and the values have changed. The range.
Is it done in the same lab?
No, out of state, completely two different labs.
Yeah. We run into this typically. Some labs prefer one way.
Thank you, Chris.
Some labs prefer the other. There's so much variation now in it. The people will look at the one where the upper limit is 10 and look at a 4.8 and say, well, shoot, I'm less than 10. I'm perfectly fine.
Right.
The reality is you're not. That number has to be less than 3.
Thank you. That's the point I was making, because this patient is 4.8 and she said, I'm good. Sweetheart, no, you're not.
No, you're not. It is a big educational program. Like I said, the rheumatologists are running it, and they run a 3 milligram per liter max, because they know that if you get over 3, you start out with your fingers getting stiff in the morning, your joints hurt a little, and it creeps up on you. And the interesting thing about inflammation is it only accumulates over time, because especially after age 50, and I'm speaking from experience here, the glutathione production that usually protects us when we're younger, and Dr. LaJoyce, you probably don't have this problem because you haven't reached that age yet, but after age 42 in women and age 50 in men, our glutathione production is cut off by nature. We no longer can convert the amino acids lysine and isoleucine into glutathione, and the sulfur amino acid, I believe it's theanone is what it is. Those two combine at the cellular level, and they produce glutathione. We reach a point in our age development that we no longer can produce that, and it's nature's way of taking us out. So when our glutathione level begins to decrease, then the accumulation of these free radicals, typically the hydroxyl free radical and other organic free radicals, will tend to accumulate in our body until finally we end up with what's called age onset disease. It can manifest itself as simply as arthritis or irritable bowel, but we also see cancer, heart disease, type 2 diabetes, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, MS, ALS. They all seem to happen in that late 40, early 50 age group. And that's the reason why. Everybody's genetically a little different as to timing. But when we did the original work, something very interesting happened. We looked at the glutathione levels and the CRP of human beings from age 5 to 105. Pulled blood samples and looked at them. and up from age 5 to about 50 in men, the glutathione levels were fairly high, and the inflammatory levels, as measured by CRP, was relatively low. And then they crossed, where I have glutathione levels being very high, CRP being very low. And then what happens is with time, if I can do this, let me see if I can do this right.
It's good.
So
you're good.
So as the glutathione level begins to decrease, the inflammatory disease state takes off.
Yes.
And this happens, they cross at 50 in men and 42 in women.
Wow.
That's where the age onset disease begins to happen. So
true. Unless you're proactive.
So now, so we have to do things. Now, we tried for the longest time with vitamin C, but you have to take so much to offset it. And then vitamin C is what's called a pro-oxidant, in that when it's processed in the liver, you get an inflammatory response from the metabolic process of metabolizing vitamin C, the B complexes, even vitamin D to some extent. Vitamin A, vitamin E, they're all listed as pro-oxidants, which means they will generate an inflammatory response. And we see it in non-alcoholic fatty liver disease caused by excess supplement usage.
Okay. Listen, this is better than any response I could have bargained for. You broke it down beautifully, and this is why I wanted to bring it to you. The solution, Dr. Sam, because we always want to present solid solutions. What is the solution to maintaining good levels of CRP or diminishing those CRP levels if they're elevated?
It's all in the form of antioxidants. So quality becomes an issue and quantity both. So when we just eat certain vegetables that are harvested at different periods of time, they have varying levels of antioxidants. So it's very, very difficult to get a consistent supply of antioxidants strictly from our diet. We get some, but we still see people that eat a lot of vegetables. They still end up with disease. But it has to do a lot with how the vegetables are grown, which oftentimes the growers don't have control over that. How much sunlight, how much water, how much nutrients is in the soil that convert the proper amount of vitamins. For example, one of the radio shows I did last week where I discussed fruits and where are the antioxidants found in the fruits. Well, from a high concentration point of view, the antioxidants are found in the skins of the apples, not in the juicy, sweet part of the apple.
Oh, yes.
Now, when we ate apples that were only that big, we had a surface area of skin, but we had the whole volume of the apple. When we ate an apple that big, there was enough antioxidants in the skin to offset the fructose, the inflammatory molecules in the fruit. Now guess what we do? We grow apples that are that big. Large Fuji apples or Macintosh apples, where the surface area to volume is very, very low.
Yes.
So we have, as something gets bigger in radius, the surface area to volume ratio goes down by the inverse of the radius. So what happens is the bigger we make fruits, because we want the juicy, sweet part of the fruit, so we eat more fruit. We're depleting the relative amount of antioxidants needed to offset the fructose in that fruit. And that's why big fruits, pineapples, for example, we only eat the fruit. We don't eat the hard skin where most of the pectin and the vitamins are actually located.
But we
There's
should.
still some, and there's still some in the fruit, but not nearly enough to offset the inflammatory response you get from the fructose as you eat it.
Got it. So this was a lesson for the ages. It will go down with 10 stars from me. And you stay right there because we're going to keep you for another episode to share next week. Thank you, Dr. Sam. Don't you go away. For all the rest of you, you're welcome. We will see you all next week with Dr. Sam and a whole lot more for lesson number 2. I want to thank the team, Chris, both Chris's, Christopher Green, the technical producer, and Chris Brown, the announcer today, and supervising producer, Irvin Wright IW. Thank you for joining me to let your eyes shine, cut back on the wine, get good food fast, and go easy on the greasy. Until next time, I'm Dr. LaJoyce Brookshire, here to help you attain and maintain your perfect health. Let's do it again next week, okay? God bless you.